still remember that afternoon so clearly. The sun was soft, the kind that makes everything look peaceful. I had gone out to buy a few groceries, nothing special, just the usual things for dinner. My husband had left his car keys on the counter, and since my own car was being serviced, I decided to take his. I didn't think much of it. We'd been married for over 20 years, and trust was something I thought we had built long ago. As I opened the glove compartment to put my sunglasses away, I saw something I wasn't expecting. A small box, half open, sitting carelessly under a few papers. At first, I didn't pay attention, but when I moved the papers aside and saw what it was, my hands froze. It was a box of condoms, 5 of them. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. My heart started beating so fast that I thought it might burst. It felt like the world had stopped moving. I just stared at them, unable to understand what I was looking at. My husband hadn't used protection with me in years. We were long past that stage. So why were they there? I remember my mind going blank, then filling up all at once with questions I didn't want to ask. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe they weren't his. Maybe someone borrowed the car. Maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, a quiet voice told me otherwise. I sat there for a long time, staring at that little box as if it could give me answers. The air felt heavier with each passing second. My hands trembled, my throat tightened, and I could feel my eyes start to burn. I didn't cry yet, not then. I was too numb for tears. When I got home, he was sitting on the couch watching TV like nothing was wrong. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger in the man I had loved for so many years. He smiled when he saw me, asked how my day was, and for a moment I almost answered normally. But something inside me shifted that day. Something fragile broke quietly, without a sound. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay there beside him, listening to his breathing, wondering what had changed, wondering when love had turned into silence, wondering why the man who once promised to protect my heart was now the reason it ached. And in that silence, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't accuse. I would wait. I would find the truth. And when I did, I would decide what to do not out of anger, but out of love. Because even in that pain, I still loved him, and maybe that was the hardest part of all. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Life moved in small, steady circles around me. Cooking, cleaning, tending to the little plants on my balcony, reading old letters. On the outside, everything looked normal, but inside, a quiet ache had settled in my heart. I told myself it was just a phase, that sons get busy after marriage, that this distance was part of growing up, his, not mine. I had spent so many years holding his hand, guiding him through everything. Perhaps now it was time to let go. But letting go was harder than I thought. Every morning, when I made tea, I still poured 2 cups. One for myself and one for him, out of habit. Sometimes I would sit at the table and look at the second cup growing cold, wondering if he'd even remember that tea used to be our little ritual. He liked it strong, with less milk. I could still see him as a boy, swinging his legs from the chair, sipping tea and saying, "Mom, yours always tastes better than anyone's." Now the cup sat untouched. There were moments when I wanted to call him, to just hear his voice, to ask how his day went. But each time I stopped myself. What if he was busy? What if his wife didn't like me calling too often? I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to be the mother who couldn't let go. So I waited. Sometimes, when loneliness felt heavy, I'd go to the market just to be around people. The vegetable sellers knew me well by now. They would smile, ask about my health, and for a few minutes I felt seen again. I would linger at the flower stalls, touching the petals softly, remembering how Arav used to buy me small bunches of marigolds on my birthday when he was little. He once said, "You look happiest around flowers, Mom." He was right. Flowers don't speak, but they make you feel less alone. Evenings were the hardest. The light would fade from the sky, and the city lights would begin to glow. I'd sit by the window knitting something, a habit I had picked up long ago. Most of the time, I didn't even know what I was knitting for anymore. My fingers just needed something to do, to keep the thoughts from spilling over. Sometimes, I'd scroll through my phone and look at his old pictures. his first school uniform, the birthday cake we made together, the two of us standing outside our old house. His smile was different then, softer, purer. It was a smile that belonged to me too. One night, I saw a new photo on his social media, him and his wife, smiling at a restaurant table, a birthday cake between them. The caption read, "Best evening with my favorite person." I smiled at the screen. It was genuine, though a small part of me trembled inside. I was glad he was happy, truly glad, but there was also a quiet whisper in my heart, the kind that asks, when did I stop being his favorite person? I told myself I shouldn't feel that way. Love isn't meant to be owned or measured. Still, when your whole world once revolved around one person, it's hard to accept that you've become a small corner in theirs. A few months later, I got a call from an unknown number. It was his wife. Her voice was polite, almost distant. She said Arav had been traveling for work and was quite busy. I thanked her for calling. After a pause, she asked if I was doing all right. "I'm fine," I said softly, and I was. At least that's what I told myself. When I hung up, I looked around the room. The walls felt emptier somehow. I walked to the shelf where Arav's old books still sat. I opened one, an old science textbook, and found a note inside. In his childish handwriting, it said, "Love you, Mom. I'll buy you a big house one day." I sat down with that note in my hands, my eyes blurring with tears. He had already given me everything I ever wanted. His laughter, his dreams, his childhood. I didn't need a big house. I just wanted to be remembered. In the months that followed, I started taking on small sewing jobs again. It kept me occupied, and it made the days pass a little faster. I stitched dresses for neighborhood children, curtains for newlyweds, and even little pillow covers with bright patterns. Every stitch felt like a memory being woven into fabric. One afternoon, a little boy from next door came running to me with a torn shirt. "Auntie, can you fix this?" he asked. I smiled and nodded. As I sewed, he sat beside me, swinging his legs. His voice, his innocent chatter, it reminded me so much of Arav. When he thanked me and ran off, I found myself whispering, "You're welcome, Beta," and for a brief moment, it filled the quiet space in my heart. As the year passed, my health began to weaken a little. Nothing serious, just the aches and tiredness that come with age. The doctor advised rest, but rest only made the silence louder. I often found myself talking to the walls, to the framed photos, to the memories that lingered like old friends. Sometimes I imagined Arav walking through the door. I imagined his voice calling, "Mom, I'm home." The thought alone brought a strange comfort. Maybe that's what hope is. Believing in something even when you know it might never happen. Then one day, I received a message from him. Just a short one. "Hey, hope you're doing well. Been a little busy. We'll call soon." I read it over and over. 3 lines, that's all. But to me, it felt like sunlight breaking through a cloudy sky. I replied, "I'm fine, Beta. Take care of yourself." I wanted to say more, to tell him I missed him, that I still made his favorite tea every morning. But I stopped myself. Mothers often carry love silently. After that message, he didn't call for several weeks. But I held on to those words, "We'll call soon," as if they were a promise. To fill my evenings, I began visiting the nearby park. There were benches under large trees, and the sound of children playing always brought me peace. I would sit there for an hour, sometimes knitting, sometimes just watching the sky change colors. There was an elderly couple that came regularly too, the man pushing his wife's wheelchair, both smiling as they fed the birds together. Watching them made me think of what life could have been if my husband had lived longer, if our little family had stayed whole. But fate doesn't ask for permission. It simply moves forward. One day it began to rain while I was still in the park. Everyone ran for shelter, but I didn't. I stayed there letting the rain soak through my clothes. The air smelled fresh, and for a moment, it washed away the heaviness inside me. When I got home, I made tea and sat by the window again. The sound of the rain felt like company, a soft, endless conversation with the past. I realized then that loneliness doesn't always mean being alone. Sometimes it means being surrounded by memories that have nowhere to go. That evening, I found myself writing a letter to Arav. Not because I expected a reply, but because I needed to say things that had no place in short text messages. I wrote slowly, carefully. My dear son, I hope you're happy and healthy. I know life keeps you busy, and I understand that you have responsibilities now. I just want you to know that I'm proud of you. More than words can ever say. I miss you, but I don't want you to feel guilty for that. Every mother waits, it's what we do. And even when you forget to call, my heart never stops blessing you, love, Mom. When I finished, I folded the letter neatly and placed it inside a book, the same one that still held his childhood note. Some words are not meant to be sent. They are meant to be kept, as whispers to time. That night, I felt peaceful for the first time in months. Maybe love doesn't always need to be returned. Maybe it just needs a place to rest. It happened on an ordinary Thursday, one of those quiet, windless afternoons where time feels heavy and slow. The clock ticked lazily on the wall, and I sat on the edge of my bed, folding clothes that no one else would wear. I had just finished a cup of tea when the phone buzzed. The sound startled me. It had been weeks since I'd heard that tone. My heart skipped a beat as I saw his name flash on the screen. Arav. For a moment, I froze. I wanted to answer right away, but my hands trembled. I wiped them quickly on my shawl and pressed the button. Hello? My voice came out smaller than I expected. There was a pause. Then his voice, calm, polite, distant. Hi, Mom. I smiled instinctively, though he couldn't see it. It's so good to hear your voice, Beta. How are you? He talked for a while, mostly about work, some new project, a recent trip. I listened quietly, nodding even though he couldn't see me, but the words were few, the tone mechanical. It wasn't a conversation. It was an update. I could hear other voices in the background, maybe his wife, maybe colleagues. Before I could ask how she was doing, he said softly, Mom, actually, the reason I called... He paused, searching for words. We're moving abroad. It's a good opportunity. Just wanted to let you know. The world seemed to tilt a little. I clutched the phone tighter. That's wonderful, Beta, I said, forcing my voice to sound cheerful. You've worked so hard. You deserve this. He thanked me, said something about being busy with paperwork, then promised to stay in touch. The call lasted less than 5 minutes. When the line went dead, I stared at the phone screen for a long time. The last message blinked faintly. Call ended. Abroad. A word that sounded so small, but carried oceans between us. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay on my bed, listening to the fan hum softly, and thought about how far abroad really was. Would I still get to see him once a year? Once in 5? Or maybe never again, except on a glowing screen? I turned to look at the framed photo of us on the nightstand. It was taken years ago. Arav in his college graduation gown, me standing beside him, my hand resting on his shoulder. I remembered how proud I felt that day, how I thought the world was opening wide for him. I didn't realize it meant it would also close around me. The following days felt strangely quiet. Even the city's noise and the traffic, the vendors, the chatter, seemed distant. I went about my chores slowly, as if each task weighed more than it used to. I tried not to think about packing in airports and goodbyes. I told myself I was happy for him. That's what mothers are supposed to feel, right? Pride, not pain. But every time I saw an airplane in the sky, my eyes followed it until it disappeared behind the clouds. A few days later, a delivery boy arrived at my door. He handed me a medium-sized box with Arav's name on it. My hands shook as I signed the paper. When I opened it, I found a few household items. Books, some clothes, a framed photo of me that used to be on his study table. At the bottom there was a small envelope with my name written neatly. Inside was a letter, typed, not handwritten. Mom, I'm sorry I couldn't visit before we leave. Things are moving really fast. I wanted to send you a few of my things so you'd have them. I'll call when we settle in. Please don't worry about me. Take care of your health. Love, Arav. I read it several times. There was nothing wrong with it. Polite, caring, respectful. But it felt like reading a note from a stranger. Typed words, no warmth, no small inside jokes like he used to write. I placed the letter beside the one I had written months ago, the one I never sent. Together they looked like echoes of two people who once knew how to talk, but forgot along the way. The days passed quietly after that. The apartment felt bigger, emptier. I began giving away a few things. Clothes I no longer wore, old kitchen utensils, even some of Arav's childhood toys. I couldn't explain why, but I felt like I was preparing for something. Maybe for the silence that was coming. A week before his departure, I received another message. We're flying out next weekend. I'll video call you from the airport. He didn't. I waited that whole evening, sitting near the window with my phone in my hand. The light faded, the sounds of the city turned into whispers, and still, the screen stayed blank. At midnight, I realized the call wasn't coming. I went to bed, but my mind kept replaying the last time he had hugged me, years ago, brief and distracted. The next morning I made tea, but it tasted bitter. Not because I forgot the sugar, but because my heart wasn't in it anymore. I sat there thinking about how easily life moves on. Children grow, dreams expand, and somehow love gets lost in translation. No one means to hurt anyone. It just happens, quietly, like dust settling on old furniture. That evening, my neighbor, Mrs. Rao, knocked on my door. She was in her 60s, cheerful and kind. "You haven't been out lately," she said. "Come join us at the temple fair tomorrow." I hesitated, then agreed. Maybe a little noise and color would help fill the empty corners of my heart. The next day I went with her. The fair was lively. Children laughing, music playing, the smell of sweets in the air. I smiled politely, bought some flowers, and for a while, let myself forget everything. But in the crowd, I saw a young man helping his mother buy bangles. He looked so much like Arav for a second that my breath caught. The woman held his hand as she laughed, and I felt something sharp twist inside me. I turned away quickly, blinking back tears. That simple gesture, a son holding his mother's hand, had once been my everyday comfort. Now it was just a memory that belonged to someone else. When I returned home, the silence greeted me again. The clock ticked. The room smelled faintly of jasmine from the flowers I had bought. I sat down and whispered to myself, he must have reached by now. That night, I dreamt of him as a little boy again, running toward me after school, waving his report card. "I got first prize, Mom," he said in that bright, excited voice. I lifted him, spun him around, laughing as his small arms wrapped around my neck. But then, as dreams do, everything changed. His face grew older, his smile faded, and he walked away into a fog I couldn't enter. I woke up with tears on my pillow. In the following weeks, I tried to adjust to the thought of him being far away. I learned to measure my days by smaller things. The taste of morning tea, the bloom of flowers on my balcony, the sound of the temple bells in the distance. I wrote letters I never sent. I spoke to his photograph as if he could hear me. And slowly, I began to understand something. Maybe love isn't meant to stay the same. Maybe it changes shape, from touch to memory, from closeness to distance, from words to silence. It hurt to admit it, but I had to. My son had built a new world, and I was no longer at the center of it. That realization didn't come with anger, only with a soft, quiet grief. Still, I prayed for him every night. I prayed that he would find joy, that he would never feel the emptiness I did, because that's what mothers do. Even when forgotten, they keep loving. Even when not called Mom, they keep being one. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the walls in orange light, I whispered to myself, maybe this is what growing old means. Learning to love from far away. The words comforted me, even though they hurt. I didn't know it then, but life still had one more moment waiting for me. A quiet, unexpected gesture that would change how I saw everything. The first few months after Arav moved abroad felt like walking through fog. The days blended together, each one quiet, each one somehow the same. The morning sun would fill my little kitchen. I'd make tea, water the plants, and sit by the window, my small world still turning, even if his had moved far away. I thought I would cry more. I thought I would break down. But I didn't. Tears had turned into something else, something softer, almost invisible. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was emptiness. And emptiness, I learned, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just hums quietly in the background of life. At first, I waited for his calls like someone waits for rain in a dry season. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, only to find it was a wrong number, a delivery message, or a call from a friend. Eventually, I stopped waiting by the phone. It wasn't that I gave up. I just grew tired of hoping. One morning, I woke up and decided I needed to do something different. I had been living inside the walls of memory for too long. Arav had his own life. Maybe it was time I found mine again. So I joined a small community center nearby. They offered free classes, art, yoga, and reading groups for older people. The first day I sat quietly at the back of a painting class, unsure of what I was doing there. The instructor gave us brushes and colors and told us to paint what we felt. I looked at the blank canvas for a long time. I didn't know how to paint. I hadn't held a brush since school. But then, without thinking, I began to paint a small figure. A woman standing by a window. Sunlight touching her face. A single cup of tea beside her. Around her there was quietness, but her eyes looked calm. When I stepped back and saw it, I realized it was me. I smiled, a small, peaceful smile. For the first time in years, I felt something light inside my chest. Not happiness exactly, but peace. I started going to that class every week. Slowly, I made friends. Other women my age, each with her own story. Some had children living abroad. Some had lost their husbands. Some were simply alone. When we talked, there was comfort in the shared understanding. No one judged. No one pitied. We simply listened. One woman, Lata, became especially close to me. She was soft-spoken and kind. We often sat together after class, sharing snacks and stories from our younger days. One afternoon, she said something I never forgot. When children grow up, we stop being the center of their world. But that doesn't mean we stop being mothers. It just means we love from a distance. I nodded. Her words sank deep into me. That evening, I came home and looked around my apartment. For the first time, it didn't feel like a place of waiting. It felt like my own home again. I cleaned the shelves, rearranged the furniture, and hung my painting on the wall. It wasn't perfect, but it reminded me that I was still here, still capable of creating something beautiful. Days turned into weeks again, but this time, they didn't feel heavy. I began writing in a small journal every night, small notes about my day, things I saw, how I felt. Sometimes I wrote letters to Arav but never sent them. Writing became my way of speaking when there was no one to listen. Then, one afternoon, I received an email. It was from Arav's wife. My heart raced as I opened it. She wrote that they had settled well abroad, that life was busy but good. She thanked me for raising him so well, said he was doing great at work, and attached a few pictures of their new home, their garden, and one of them smiling in front of a tall building. At the end, she wrote, "He talks about you often, you know. He misses your cooking." That line, simple, almost casual, filled my eyes with tears. I didn't realize I had been holding my breath until that moment. He missed my cooking. He remembered, It was strange how such small words could feel like a hug across oceans. I closed the email, sat back, and smiled through tears. Maybe he didn't call often. Maybe he forgot birthdays. But deep down, he still carried a part of me. That night, I cooked his favorite dish, aloo paratha with butter, even though there was no one to share it with. As I ate, I imagined him as a child again, sitting across from me, asking for one more. The memory was so vivid that I could almost hear his laughter. After dinner, I stepped out onto the balcony. The sky was full of stars, scattered like the moments we once shared. I whispered, "I'm happy for you, Beta." And the wind carried my words into the night. The next morning, something inside me felt lighter. I made tea and poured 2 cups again. One for me, one for memory. It wasn't out of sadness anymore, but out of gratitude. Those years, those moments, they were real. They were mine, and no distance could take them away. A few days later, at the community center, we had a small event where everyone shared their art and stories. When it was my turn, I stood before the small group and spoke softly. "I used to think love meant holding on," I said. "But now I know. Sometimes love means letting go, quietly, gently, without anger, without demand. It means wishing someone happiness, even if that happiness doesn't include you." When I finished, there was silence. Then, one by one, they nodded. Some smiled. Some had tears in their eyes. And in that moment, I didn't feel alone. After the event, Lotta came to me and said, "You should share your story with others. You have such warmth in your words." I laughed softly. "It's just an ordinary story," I said. She shook her head. "No story told with love is ordinary." That night, as I lay in bed, her words echoed in my mind. Maybe she was right. Maybe there's value in quiet lives too. In the way we endure, the way we love, the way we heal without anyone noticing. As weeks passed, I continued to find peace in small things. The sound of rain, the laughter of children playing downstairs, the soft glow of the lamp in the evening. These became my companions. Life didn't feel empty anymore. It just felt quieter, gentler. Then, one morning, I received a small parcel. The sender's name made my heart skip. Arav. Inside was a scarf. Beautiful, hand-woven, with a note attached. "For you, Mom. It's getting cold here, and I remembered how you always knitted scarves for me. Thought it's time I send one back. Love, Arav." I held the scarf close to my chest, inhaling the faint scent of new fabric. My eyes blurred, and I smiled through the tears. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't a long message. But it was enough. Sometimes love returns quietly, without fanfare. It arrives in small packages, in simple words, in moments that say, "I remember you." That evening, I wore the scarf and sat by the window with my tea. The city lights shimmered in the distance. I didn't cry. I just sat there, feeling the warmth of that cloth and the warmth of his thought. For the first time in years, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt understood. Not through words, but through something deeper. As night settled, I whispered softly, "Thank you, my son." And in the silence that followed, it almost felt like I heard him whisper back, from across the world, "I love you, Mom." It's been 3 years since the day my son stopped calling me Mom. And yet, when I wake up every morning, it feels like just yesterday that his little hand held mine as we crossed the road, his voice filling the air with endless questions and laughter. Time has its own strange way of softening pain. It doesn't erase it. It just wraps it in gentleness, until one day, you can look at your memories without breaking. I've learned to live differently now. My days have a rhythm, a calm that used to scare me but now feels comforting. The mornings begin with tea and quiet prayer. I water the plants, watch the birds, and sometimes hum old songs I used to sing to Arav when he was a boy. The silence that once felt heavy has turned into a friend. It sits beside me when I read, walks with me when I go to the park, and whispers softly at night. Not of loneliness, but of peace. I no longer wait for the phone to ring. I don't count the days since his last message. Instead, I count the blessings in my day. The gentle sun, the laughter of my neighbor's children, the little joys that once went unnoticed. Arav calls sometimes now, not often, but enough. The conversations are short, simple. Updates about work, the weather, his new project. But every word is precious. When he says, "Take care, Mom," I still feel that tiny ache in my heart. But it's no longer from pain. It's from love that has learned to stand on its own feet. Sometimes he sends pictures, a weekend trip, a family dinner, their new car. I look at them and smile, whispering silent prayers for his happiness. There's no jealousy, no bitterness, only warmth. That's the thing about a mother's love. It changes shape, but it never disappears. Last winter, during one of my community center meetings, we were asked to talk about what peace means to us. When it was my turn, I stood up and said softly, "Peace for me is when I stopped waiting for things to go back to how they were. It's when I learned to be grateful for what is, instead of what was." The room was silent. Then someone started clapping, and slowly, others joined in. It wasn't applause for something great I'd done. It was a shared understanding. Every person there had loved someone who drifted away. Every heart there knew what it felt like to love without return. After the meeting, a younger woman came to me. She had tears in her eyes. She said, "My mother and I haven't spoken in years. Listening to you, I think I want to call her." I held her hand and said, "Don't wait too long, Beta. Mothers forgive easily, but time doesn't wait for anyone." That evening, as I walked home, I realized something. Maybe that's what all this pain was for. Not to break me, but to soften me. To teach me that love, at its purest, doesn't ask for anything in return. One Sunday morning, while cleaning my old cupboard, I found a box full of Arav's childhood things. A tiny red sweater, a toy car, his first school drawing, a birthday card that said, "To the best mom in the world." I sat down on the floor, holding that card, and smiled. The edges were worn, the colors faded, but the words still carried warmth. In that moment, I didn't feel sad. I felt grateful for the little boy he once was, for the man he had become, for the love that had filled our home once upon a time. I put everything back in the box carefully, tied it with a ribbon, and placed it on the shelf. Not to hide it away, but to honor it, like a treasure that doesn't need to be reopened to know its worth. Life keeps moving, quietly but surely. Sometimes I sit by the window and watch families walking together, parents holding their children's hands, talking, laughing. I don't feel jealous anymore. Instead, I feel a quiet blessing rise inside me. May they never forget each other. Every mother, I've learned, carries two hearts, one that beats for herself, and one that beats for her child, no matter how far he goes. Even if the world changes, even if names and relationships fade with time, that second heart never stops beating. Some nights, I dream of Arav as a little boy again. In my dream, he runs toward me with open arms, shouting, "Mom!" I wake up smiling. It doesn't make me cry anymore. It feels like my soul reminding me that love doesn't disappear. It just lives in different forms. Last month, he called out of the blue. His voice sounded softer than usual. He said, "Mom, we're expecting a baby." For a second, I couldn't speak. My hands trembled and my heart felt like it might burst. Then I laughed, a deep, heartfelt laugh that filled my small room. "Congratulations, my son," I said. "You'll be a wonderful father." After we hung up, I sat quietly, staring at the ceiling. The world felt full again, not because of the call, but because I realized life always gives us new ways to love. I started knitting the next day. A small white sweater, just like the one I made for him years ago. Stitch by stitch, I wove my love into it, my prayers into each loop. It felt like healing all over again. Maybe one day, that little baby will call him Papa. And maybe, just maybe, he'll understand what it means when a tiny voice fills your world, and then one day grows silent. Now, as I sit here, writing these words, the evening light spills softly across my table. The city outside hums with distant life. Cars, laughter, footsteps. Inside, there is only peace. I look at my painting on the wall, the woman by the window, sunlight on her face. She's still there, still standing, still calm. That woman is me, and she's stronger than she ever thought she could be. I've learned that love doesn't always stay the way we expect it. Sometimes it changes shape. Sometimes it walks away, but the beauty of love is that it leaves warmth behind. Something you can carry, quietly, for the rest of your life. I don't know when Arav will visit next. Maybe next month, maybe next year. It doesn't matter. Because now I understand, being a mother isn't about being remembered all the time. It's about remembering, always. When I see the stars at night, I whisper his name. When I smell rain, I think of his laughter. When I sit down for dinner, I still set 2 plates, one for me, one for memory. And that, I think, is the quiet strength of a mother's heart, to keep loving, even when no one is watching, to forgive, even without apology, to hope, even when hope is silent. So if you're listening to this, maybe you're a mother or a son, or a daughter. I just want to say this. Call your mother, write to her, tell her you love her. Because one day, when the calls grow fewer and the voices fade, all that will remain are the words you did say, not the ones you waited too long to speak. As for me, I'll keep living my quiet life, watering my plants, making tea, knitting sweaters for a grandchild I haven't met yet. And every time the wind touches my face, I'll smile, knowing it carries my love across oceans, to the boy who once called me Mom.